Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in July. I have quite the stack, which you probably all saw in the thumbnail, and I think the way that I want to structure this video is to talk about my DNFs, like go from worst to first, if I can. Might take a little bit of like brain. I haven't pre-ranked my books, but I think that I'll go from worst to first, and that is how we will rank them. Oh my goodness, things are going a little bit haywire over here. If you are new to my channel, then hi, I'm Shelly. I love books and reading. I also have two little boys that love to show their face. I think they find it really fun. I love books and reading. I read a ton of different kinds of books, and I have a whole channel, this channel that you're watching now, dedicated to books and reading. So if you also like that kind of thing, if you love learning and this is like vibing with you, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around, and without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I have a couple of DNFs, which don't really happen that often. Oh, I made a bookmark. At my local library, and so here she is. I think she's very cute. First book I did not finish was Martha Wells' Witch King. Martha Wells is most known for her sci-fi series called the Murderbot series, which is, by the way, I've read the first two books and it's a fantastic series because Murderbot has quite a he's got quite the millennial, or it has quite the millennial-esque personality, you know, wanting to go out and do its purpose, but, you know, instead, like having this push and pull between purpose and just wanting to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. Anyways, I quite enjoy Murderbot. There's a humor to it. Now, maybe I'm saying all of this to avoid why I DNF'd Witch King. Witch King was very weird. This is a fantasy book. I read this, or I got through half of it because it was for the Up to No Good book club. I will leave all of the members of that book club linked down below in case you want to see their reviews of the book. It did not go well. Get your thoughts together, Shelly. Why I DNF'd this book is because Martha Wells would take you along on this plot, and in some ways it would be exciting or at least interesting. And suddenly, I think the way that it read was that all of a sudden something happened, but you needed context to appreciate why that thing happened. And so Martha Wells would stop the plot, go back in time to explain the context, then bring you back forward and continue with the plot. And so it just felt like I was constantly being snatched out of the story in order to explain what was happening. And about halfway through, I had it. I didn't want to pick it up. I didn't care why the thing was happening. And I thought it was just poor writing through and through. And so I DNF'd Witch King by Martha Wells. I don't even have cats, y'all. It's my child that's acting like a cat. The second book I DNF'd was Mel the Chosen by Rachelle Argano, or Rachelle, depending on what pronunciation you want. I'm actually a Rachelle. That's my real adult name. My nickname is Shelly, but I've heard people say it Rachelle or Rachelle, you know. So anyways, she doesn't have the extra L, so I'm not really sure how she says her name. You know what? I'm gonna stop my little diversions down rabbit trails. I'm just going here, there, and everywhere, and I will try and focus. So I picked this up because I really quite liked the artwork. I thought it was really pretty. I'll show you some of the pages. I really love finding graphic novels naturally, like out in the wild on the shelves at my library. I go to that section. This is a juvenile or a junior graphic novel, so it's for someone that's between the ages of like 8 and 11, you know, I would say. And I got through about half of this and I was really intrigued and pulled in by the artwork. I thought that the art was really beautiful and quite distinct. Now, when I read this, I read about half of this, and the plot and the story is very nonsensical. And there was a point where I was like, I'm just not enjoying this, and I'm tired of reading books that I'm just not enjoying, even if they are like relatively, it would be easy to finish this. It would be easy to finish this because it's not going to take a bunch of my time, but it's like I got real with myself. I sat myself down and I was like, are you enjoying this? And then I was like, no. Do you want to pick this up? No. And so I was like, I'm going to honor that feeling and I'm going to honor myself, and I'm not going to pick this up, even though I found the artwork really, really compelling. I would be interested if this artist paired up with a writer, maybe even a well-known writer, and I would love to see a collaboration with this artist because I think her art is fantastic and it's brilliant. But the story itself, it felt like Alice in Wonderland, but gone wrong. If y'all know, I don't really like Alice in Wonderland. I think it's, again, nonsensical in a way that it doesn't charm me. It just doesn't. And so it had that vibe, and yeah, so I'm glad that I honor the feeling of like, I'm just not enjoying this. Going from the DNFs to the books that I thought were okay, they were fine, par for the course. They were just fine, y'all. So the first one was the third book in the Patrick Melrose series, which is by Edward St. Auburn. And essentially with this series, it is about a young man named Patrick Melrose who had an incredibly difficult childhood, who comes from wealth but was very much abused. That is not a spoiler. Actually, you should probably know that before going in. And at this point, so in the first book, we meet Patrick when he's a child and see the circumstances in which he's growing up, mostly the parents that he's with. And then in the second book, we meet him in his early 20s, and he's just a hot mess. I mean, a complete hot mess, and like on drugs and stuff. And then in the third book, he is older and still somehow doesn't have his life together. This was interesting. I thought it's hard because I'm reading the fourth book now and I'm getting the fourth book and the third book a little bit mixed up because the fourth book is just brilliant. It's called Mother's Milk. I'm not enough through the book to really say a lot about it. But this third book, this is why this book was okay for me. It's like I've already kind of forgotten the details of the book, and there wasn't a lot like sharpening what was going on in this particular book. So we meet Patrick Melrose again, like we're fast forwarding a decade or so, and at this point it's like we're returning to the form of the first book, which is that we're meeting all of these different characters and they're all going to culminate, like it's a book set over the course of a single day. We're meeting all these characters and it's going to culminate at a dinner party at the end. And along the way, Patrick Melrose has some really pivotal interactions with people. And in a lot of ways, it's like, hello there, my old friend.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I have an affection for Patrick Melrose, despite him not being a very good person, but I'm rooting for him in a way. And I thought there was one profound moment in the book, and that profound moment stuck out to me. But the rest of it was it was just a bit quiet, not a lot going on, and in a lot of ways it was returning to the form of the first book, which worked in a very similar way. So yeah, and then it's being overshadowed by the following book. It's strange reading a series because it's not a series like a mystery where it has this rhythm and this closure to it. Instead, we're like following the series of a person's life. It almost feels like living biographies, and it makes sense because it's semi-autobiographical for Edward St. Auburn, the author. And so as we're checking in, it feels very different than a series, but in a weird way, I feel invested. I feel invested to Patrick Melrose. So even though not every book is blowing me away, I am invested in finishing out his story and what happens to him because I'm curious. I want to know. I think I used this analogy when I was talking about the first book, but it's almost like you're you're seeing this dark, it's almost like you're peeping in, you're peeping Tom. No, you're not. It's almost like you're looking into, you have this glimpse into somebody's life that we don't talk about as a society and that we don't get to see. And you're kind of looking at it from afar and as this stranger from this distance. And on the one hand, you're like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to know that about humanity. But then in another way, you're like, I can't look away. Like, I must know. And so, yeah, so it's giving me that feeling where I'm like, I can't look away. And now I'm like invested in the main character. So I want to keep going. But I would say that the book Some Hope is interesting. And the sort of mic drop moment in the book was very effective. I'm reading all of the Edward St. Auburn books with my friend Fraser at the channel Springboard Thought. I will definitely leave his channel linked down below. Next up, I read the graphic novel Waves by Ingrid Chabret or Chabret, I don't know, Chabbbert, which you probably already see on the screen because I have it edited in. I read this because Gemma of Gemma Books here on Booktube, I will leave her channel link down below. She's been talking about this quite a bit and how it deeply affected her. And I was like, of course, I'm like, if it made you cry, I'm so curious about it. What does that say about me? I don't know. We're not going to read into that. But she, she really wanted others to read it. And so I read it. And I will say, so it is about a couple, a lesbian couple trying to have a child and the heartbreaking and heart-wrenching journey of their experience. And it's almost like one episode, like it reads as one long sort of episode of this couple's journey and how they felt. Very short graphic novel and very effective at what it's doing. Interestingly, I've read and I've listened to, I actually listened to a podcast episode that was like this exact story. And so as I was reading, it was just reminding me of that very particular podcast episode that I had experienced. And so it wasn't very surprising to me. And I knew about this experience of conception and loss and this journey. And so I think it didn't affect me as deeply as it did Gemma, though I thought it was good and an important story. And if you don't know much about the sort of the non-traditional and sometimes really hard, the hard journey to conceiving a child, and what that is like, and sometimes the profound loss that couples go through. If you don't know much about that journey, this is a wonderful book to get a glimpse inside that experience. But I've been interested in this topic before, so when I read it, I wasn't as deeply moved, I think, as I could have been if I didn't know anything about what that journey is like. A good book, like it's a good book. It's almost like, but for me, it's slightly forgettable because I kind of forgot that I had read it until I refreshed my memory. So sorry about that. But still, like, I would recommend it, especially if you're interested in that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely, those are my two, like, okay books, I'll quickly run through and not talk about the Booktube prize books I finished this month. I did a whole video dedicated on my thoughts to the nonfiction books I read over the course of 2 months. But for the sake of just keeping an accurate log, I read Eating for Extinction by Dan Saladino, and the subtitle is The Rarest Foods and Why We Need to Save Them. If you want to know all of my thoughts, I will leave my Booktube prize ranking and reviewing video linked down below. But this Dan Saladino's book was in that group. Also this month I read Half American by Matthew F. Delmont, the epic story of African Americans fighting in World War II and at home and abroad. So I read this for the Booktube prize, and I read My Fourth Time We Drowned, The Deadliest Migration Route, I think, something like that. about Eritrean, mostly about Eritrean refugees getting stuck in Libya while they're trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea. And that was by Sally Hayden. So I did read those 3 nonfiction books. Again, detailed thoughts I will leave in the video linked down below. My next group, so I did the DNFs, and then I did my nonfiction books, which varied in quality and enjoyment for me. And then I'll do the books that I thought were solidly good, like solidly good, but not great. Like didn't light my heart on fire, okay? So a solidly good but not great book was The Bangalore Detectives Club. This is by Harini Nagendra. I read this with Mark at Book Time with Elvis. This is a mystery book set in 1950s, I think. 1940s? 1920s? Yes, 1920s. I was right with the last one, 1920s Bangalore. And I thought this was great. It's a mystery book. It's supposed to be, you know, quirky, funny, and in a lot of ways just a straight up mystery. And I love this cover. This was a gift from a friend. So thank you, friend. You know who you are. And I thought it was charming. It was very charming and well done. In its own way, a little bit predictable. I think what I really liked was the main character. I thought she was just sweet and very feminist, a very feminist figure, and I liked her and her husband. And actually, the series is called the Kaveri and Ramu series, so it's her and her husband mystery. Let me try that again. A Kaveri and Ramu mystery. So the whole series is actually named after her and her husband, and there was just something very, like, sickly sweet and incredibly charming about the couple. Like, almost unrealistically so, but I didn't care. I was just I wanted a light read, I wanted a quick read, and this was a really quick and light read, and I thought it was just super cute. And I have the second book on my Kindle, thank you, Mark, and I might get to it eventually. Sometime, these words will be printed on my tombstone. I did want to say that if you like cozy mysteries, and if you're interested in Bangalore in the 1920s, and you like a fierce and sort of, sweet and almost perfected protagonist that is a female, and that all of that appeals to you, I would imagine that you would actually quite enjoy this. Next, I finished this chunkster, and it is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Now, this is the fantasy. I think TikTok made it famous. I don't know. I don't watch TikTok at all. When I was teaching at my previous school, one of my students was like, how many hours do you spend on TikTok per day? She was like really into social media, and I was like, I spend 5 minutes per month or every 2 months on TikTok when my sister sends me a TikTok that I quote unquote need to watch. But otherwise I don't even think I have the app on my phone. I'm just not interested in that kind of media. I have too many other things to do that I enjoy, and yeah, it's not for me. But anyways, I found this is just a brick of a book. It's actually not nearly as long, or it's not as long as it actually seems like it would be. This is only like an 800-page epic fantasy. It is set in a world that it is definitely like East versus West. The storyline that I think Samantha Shannon wrote best was the West storyline, and it very much felt like it was set in the Tudor court. Very much so. The politics, the rules, the mannerisms, the way that, they lived during that time. It's like very much like candlesticks and ladies in waiting, and it was very, very much that. And in a lot of ways, the West storyline was what gripped me and intrigued me. And I thought it was good. There was like this slow unfolding and storytelling that was in it, and I thought it was really, really charming. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure why it's in my good, not great slot. I would just say that there were parts that I felt that were a bit sloggy. that were a bit difficult to get through or that kind of lost my attention a little bit. I also read this over a very long period of time because I had guests at the beginning of July, and so I didn't get to pick this up as much as I wanted to, and so that could have contributed to the feeling of a teeny bit of slowness and slugginess. But you know, because I was just like kind of stuck at a certain parts for a long period of time, but purely because of life circumstances. And but I don't know, it's like one of those books that I thought was just charming. It was really charming and a lot to love about it. So yeah, Prayer of the Orange Tree. My final book in this category, the good not great books, or that I just thought were solid, but I think I need to read this again, and then I will really kind of I'll really fall in love with it. But it's called Jane, the Fox and Me. And I saw this on a bookshelf, the bookshelves at my library, and I noticed that it got a little sticker, which I think we need to have more of these out here, like, which is the Best Illustrated Children's Book Award from the New York Times. Now, if you don't know, that is my favorite list. One of you all, Michael, you know who you are, introduced me to the Best Illustrated Picture Books, according to the New York Times, which has been going on for like 70 or 80 years. I love this list with an intense passion. It's like I can get really heatedly excited about it. I've made several videos about books that have made the list. And so I saw this little like emblem, and I was immediately intrigued because there is something about the taste, like the quality of the New York Times Best Illustrated Picture Books that has been consistent throughout the years. Anyways, so as I keep on going on and on, so I saw this, and then did I pick it up at that point? Anyways, doesn't matter. This is about a young girl who is feeling incredibly lonely. The art is very moody. It very much matches the vibe of the story. There are a lot of these gray tones, and meanwhile, while this character is feeling very lonely, she's reading Jane Eyre, and she's relating to Jane Eyre and the story of Jane Eyre while she's going through these feelings. And I thought it was brilliantly done. Brilliantly done. It is so good. Now, the reason why it's in the good, not great is because I think I really do need to read it again for it to stick with me for longer than it has. Because this is such a quiet story, I think it runs the risk of it being forgettable for me, which is why I need to read it again, and which is why it's in my good, not great little pile. So yeah, but really just, if you love art and you're really into this type of reading and these types of books, beautiful art, incredible storytelling, moody books, if this is your kind of thing, then I would highly recommend you pick this up. I thought it was genius. It was really, really good. The books that turned the socks off of me. The books that I just absolutely loved. Okay, the first one I ranted and raved about in other videos, and I just thought it was one of those books where it met me at the right place at the right time, and I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was so much fun. And it made me, I actually have other books from the library from this author, and it is My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is about friends. This is set in the 80s. The friends are Abby and Gretchen, and sort of, you know, like, it's such a very, it's like the 80s movies that we all love, and we kind of are like, at least for me, sometimes I'm like, don't look at me that I love that movie, but but I love it. It has that vibe. It's like predictable in a lot of ways, but it was just so good. This is set in Charleston, South Carolina, which is just a few hours away from me. I've been to Charleston many, many, many times. And I thought that this was fantastic. It's about two friends, and then all of a sudden one of them starts acting very strange. And who knows, is she possessed by the devil? I have no idea. And so it's, you know, that's the plot essentially. And the person who is most committed to getting her, to seeing what happened to her, is her best friend. And to like seeing through the project of like figuring out what's going on with her best friend. And I mean, it's just great. It was just a joyful read. And Grady Hendrix actually has a knack And I'm stealing this from Jennifer Brooks, but who I will leave linked down below. She mentioned Grady Hendrix, and I was like, ooh, I want to read that author. He does such a great job writing women and writing the setting of the South. I think the South there's a lot of opinions about the American South. There's a lot of assumptions about the American South, and as somebody who's lived here for well over a decade, I have my own thoughts and opinions about it. And it's interesting when it's like you can just so easily spot when somebody is romanticizing it or just putting a filter on it, whether good or bad. It's just so blatant and so obvious sometimes. And I thought that Grady Hendrix does just a wonderful, fantastic and nuanced look at the South, and also just wrote really interesting and dynamic female characters while also not losing itself, the book, for it to be just a fun and wild story. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was one of those books that actually stayed up late to finish, and that is not me. Sleep always takes priority. As a busy mama and a teacher coming up, I am just like, sleep comes first, y'all. I need it. But with this, sleep did not come first. I had to finish it, and I thought it was fantastic. All right, next up is Aiding and Abetting by Muriel Spark. Have you ever had the feeling that an author is for you? Like you just feel it in your soul, essentially, or in your heart, that there is an author for you. And I felt that way about Muriel Spark. And then I read this and I was so glad that that feeling was confirmed. So she had a very long career as a writer, and she's most known for her book, The Prime of Miss Brodie. I will flash it across the screen. But I'm like, how do I say it? She tells a story with an economy of words. So thank you, George, for that lingo. There is not a word out of place. There's not a sentence that's overdone. And slowly she tells a story that is interesting, that wants to keep you going. This is about, it's just like a story within, this is about a therapist who's seeing two men who have both claimed to do the same murder. And the story unfolds from there. It's a wild, wild book. But in a weird way, she takes you on this like totally strange, fun, adventurous, exciting book. But she does it in a way that is concise, thoughtful, and that also has incredibly sharp wit. I thought this book was going to land at my like good, not great pile until literally the last 4 pages, and then I was like, that was brilliant. That was so good. I don't know, it's one of those books where I'm like, I want to read like Grady Hendrix, but Muriel Spark is a different kind of writer. Smart, brilliant, witty. She just has like an intelligence to her writing that is hard to find other places, to be honest with you. But she gave me the same feeling that Grady Hendrix did, in that like, I want to read more from her. I want to know what her writing is all about and what her career was like. It was like instantly falling in love. I'm like, Muriel Spark, you're so great. And thankfully she's got a long back catalog. There's a lot of books that she wrote. I think all of them are standalone and all of them are incredibly short. So yeah, I would just highly recommend her writing. It's got its own flavor to it. In that way, like that Daphne du Maurier, it's like when you read a Daphne du Maurier book, you know it's her because she's got a sense to her writing. She's got a style to her writing that is so Daphne du Maurier. Or Hilary Mantel. Hilary Mantel has a style to her writing that is just so Hilary Mantel. Well, I feel like Muriel Spark is another one of them, and I wouldn't be surprised if I picked up another book and I immediately was like, yes, Muriel Spark, my old friend. This sounds just like you. This sounds exactly like your writing, your wit, your intelligence, and it's all coming out. And I just love when I have that moment with an author and I could just feel it with her. It was so good. It was such a good book. And I'm so glad there's so much more to explore from her body of work as well. So anyways, just an incredible book, okay? An incredible book. My favorite book. It's so cute. I mean, it's so fun that like I edit myself back and I see myself get progressively more excited in a video, especially if I'm going from like worst to best. Oh my goodness. And I could just see my excitement grow over the course of the video, and I think it's almost hilarious. So anyways, but I just love talking about books, and I love talking about books that work. And so the book that I think like, I don't know, 8 years ago, I was like, I don't want to read that book. That's not for me. I'm not interested in it. It's just a romance novel. And then it was recommended to me by the Steve Donahue when I was just finishing up Wolf Hall and the Hilary Mantel tutor books about Thomas Cromwell. And I had asked Steve for a recommendation, tutor book recommendations, and then he made a whole video for me, which is so kind. And so what's so fun about it is that he recommended The Other Boleyn Girl. And of course, it's been years since this book was released. And I bought the book because of Steve's recommendation. And then I read the book because my friend Anita wanted to reread it. And I was totally up for this journey. I wanted to get back to the tutors who are just drama. I love drama in my books, not drama in my life. And this really served. This served drama. And so the reason why it's called The Other Boleyn Girl is that we follow Mary Boleyn, who is Anne Boleyn's sister. And in this book, she starts off as Henry VIII's lover. And slowly we see the power dynamic between the sisters change, especially as Anne gets Henry into her grips. And oh my goodness. We see the rise and fall of Anne Boleyn. I mean, it's just fantastic. What really surprised me about this book was in a lot of ways, it is a romance novel set in Tudor times and using the plot of Anne Boleyn. If you know anything about, what I'm saying. Not a spoiler because it's history, but, so if you know what happens with Anne Boleyn and Catherine, Henry's first wife, or not wife, according to him, then this is not, the plot may not be surprising. There are some twists in here, which is just fantastic. But what's interesting is that she writes the women very dynamically. Each one is very different with her approach to flirting with King Henry. Philippa Gregory definitely develops the story in a way where you understand why Henry would be drawn to Anne Boleyn and then later Jane Howard. There's just you get this sense of why, and she does such a great job creating the why for the reader. And my goodness, her character work is great. The dynamic between Anne and Henry, the dynamic between Mary and Anne, the dynamic of the Boleyn siblings, George, Mary, and Anne. I mean, all of it was really, really, really well done. And she could write a very charming man. Like, she could really write a charming guy. There were a lot of men that were very, very charming. And I just found myself sort of falling in love with different men throughout the books. And seeing myself, I saw myself as the protagonist, as Mary, during some instances. And it was just it was really well done. It was really well crafted. Not a small book, so, well worth the pages. And I just loved it. It was just such a fun book and so fun to talk to my friend Anita about the book. She's definitely more of a Tudor expert than I am. She has loved the Tudors for years and years and years and years. And so to talk to somebody who knows more and is seeing sort of things that I didn't see and is, willing to share that with me was wonderful. It was so wonderful. And I think for a long time I'd sort of written Philippa Gregory off as just somebody that is not for me, that is not perhaps my kind of author. But, lo and behold, here she is, and she's amazing. She's so great. Really have enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. I don't know if I'll pick up more from her. which is interesting because I thought, like, it's so interesting in, like, talking about, like, the best of the best, you know, like, I want to read more from Muriel Spark. I really want to read more from Grady Hendrix, and yet this comes in at, like, my #1 book, in quotes, but I don't know if I want to read more from her. But the thing was, is that it really just changed my mind about her as a writer, and I would not be, like, if I saw the Philippa Gregory section in a used bookstore, I would be drawn to it and I would start looking at it, and who knows, I might, like, pick it up. Whereas in comparison to, like, Grady Hendrix or Muriel Spark, I'd be like, it would be hard for me to not buy the book immediately. But yeah, I thought it was just it was so good. It was so good. Juicy, delicious, fun. Okay, I'm gonna stop. And then my favorite picture book that I read this month, I read quite a few picture books, but I also found this little sticker of the New York Times Best Illustrated Picture Book, and this is Steve Jenkins' The Beetle Bug. If y'all know me, I love myself some bugs. I love bugs. I love this paper mache type art of bugs. I read this with my son, and we were both immediately sucked in. Just look at those end papers. Beautiful, right? I mean, it's so beautiful. Yeah, this is just incredibly informative about, it's a nonfiction book about beetles. It's an informative book about beetles, and the art really enhanced the information that was being given, and I thought it was so lovely. It was such a lovely book. I'm so glad, again, I sort of stumbled upon this naturally out in the wild at my library, and I just thought it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. All right, so that is all that I read. Oh my goodness, that was quite a bit. That was a lot of books, y'all. Okay. Well, I'm starting school soon, so I don't think I will be reading nearly as much as I did this month. But it was, I mean, in July, but it was, I mean, so much fun, right? So much fun. Tell me your best and worst books that you read this month. What would you recommend to me if you could recommend a book to me? I would very much open to recommendations. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.